A single secret can turn an ordinary night into a doorway no one should cross, and tonight that door has already been opened. Settle in for a mystery where every clue cuts deeper than the last. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe, the secret buried beneath the Brownstone. The knock hit the door like somebody was trying to pound a confession out of the wood, and I wasn't in the mood to referee fistfights between a walnut panel and a stranger at 11:20 on a wet Manhattan night. I just cracked open a ginger ale and stretched my legs on the ottoman, thinking benign thoughts about sleep or something pretending to be it, when the knock came again, 3 blows, sharp enough to shave the varnish. It wasn't the usual timid buzz of a lost tourist or the careful tap of a delivery boy with the wrong address. This one carried desperation, wrapped tight and tied with panic. I set the bottle down, went to the door and opened it 2 inches. Rain drifted in like it was casing the joint. In it stood a young woman soaking from hat brim to hem, clutching a canvas satchel to her chest like it held either secrets or dynamite. The streetlight behind her made a halo out of her misery. "Please," she gasped. Are you Mr. Goodwin? He needs, Mr. Wolfe must see me." Now, plenty of people claim Wolfe must see them. Most turn out to be salesmen, lunatics, or unpaid interns from obscure agencies. But this woman had the unmistakable tremble of someone running from a problem with teeth. Her eyes kept darting over her shoulder like the shadows were sending invoices. I opened the door the rest of the way. "All right, that's close enough to manners to get you inside. Come on." She stumbled into the vestibule, dripping a small lake on the rug. If Fritz had been the sort to faint, the sight would have laid him out cold. He babies that rug like it's an heirloom from William Tell's living room. "I'm Lydia Merrill," she said, hugging the satchel tighter. "Archivist, Manhattan Historical Reclamation Project. Someone followed me." "Yeah, I gathered it wasn't the weather that scared the starch out of you. Hang your coat here." She didn't. She held it like a shield. "Fine, I've dealt with worse. Once a man insisted on keeping his bowler on while confessing to 2 felonies. I guided her toward the office. The lights gilded the rows of books, Wolfe's globe, my desk, and Wolfe himself, perched in his oversized chair like Mount Everest awaiting its next assault. Post-dinner, pre-orchid hours. Wolfe is not at his brightest disposition, but he tolerates emergencies, if only to complain about them later. He didn't even look up from his book when he said, "Confound it, Archie. I asked not to be disturbed." I cleared my throat. "This isn't a disturbance, it's more of a flood. Human variety." The book closed. Slowly. Wolfe looked at Lydia, took in her soaked coat, trembling hands and wild eyes. His brow lowered, but not in anger. More like the way a schoolmaster worries a problem is about to involve paperwork. "Madam," he said, "state your purpose." She tried to, but the words fell over each other. "I'm sorry, there wasn't time. They were right behind me." Fritz appeared silently at the doorway, which, under other circumstances, would be grounds for a haunting. He never comes to the door, but his chef's intuition must have pinged at the sight of a drenched human about to drip all over the parquet. He shot me a look that said, "Please control this." Wolfe gestured to a chair. "Sit. You're safe here. Archie, close the door, and fetch her a towel." I raised an eyebrow. "From where? You're not thinking of lending her one of your orchid cloths, are you? They're about the only thing in this house you treat gently." He made a sound that might have been phooey, softened by worry. "The linen closet will suffice." It was the closest he'd come all evening to admitting concern, so I went. When I returned with a towel, Lydia had regained enough coherence to breathe between syllables. "I work with historic property records," she said, rubbing her hair dry with an energy borrowed from terror. "My job is to review old deeds, permits, structural maps. Yesterday I found an 1874 land transfer. Mr. Wolfe, it included this address." Wolfe stiffened, which for him is like another man leaping out of his seat. "Nonsense. The Brownstone was purchased legally in 1932. I reviewed its provenance." "Yes," she nodded. "But the transfer I found mentioned something beneath it. Something sealed. Something no one has acknowledged for 170 years." "Something," I repeated, "is a small word with a big imagination." She reached into her satchel and pulled out an object no larger than a silver dollar, a brass surveyor's tag, stamped with a strange symbol, a circle split by a vertical line. It gleamed under the office lights, old but not fragile. "I found it wedged inside the original map tube," she said. "There were markings, notations about an auxiliary chamber beneath this row of buildings. I didn't understand the symbol, so I traced it. It belonged to a Tammany surveyor who disappeared in 1876, and then the map vanished from my office drawer. So did my notes. My supervisor accused me of misfiling them, but I know someone took them." "And this someone followed you tonight?" I asked. She nodded so vigorously I worried she'd sprained something. "I ran. I didn't know where else to go. The records mentioned your name, Mr. Wolfe. I thought, if someone was in danger from this, if anyone could understand—" Wolfe held up a hand. She stopped. "Say what you will about his girth. The man can silence a tornado by lifting his index finger. You are overwrought," he said. "You will speak plainly. What precisely did you discover?" "I think there's a sealed chamber under this block," she whispered. "Maybe under this very house, and I think someone would kill to keep it hidden." A telephone rang, from the office line, sharp and insistent. Lydia jerked like she'd been shot. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Archie." "I'm on it." I crossed to the desk. Nero Wolfe's residence. "Is she there?" a voice demanded. Female, sharp, too calm. "Who's asking?" I said, because telemarketers come in many flavors. A click. Deadline. When I turned, Lydia was already on her feet, clutching the satchel. I shouldn't have come. They know where I am. I have to go." Wolfe's voice sharpened. "Sit." "I can't." She backed toward the door. "I'm sorry. I'll come back tomorrow morning, with the rest. I promise." "You will do no such thing without rest and reflection," Wolfe snapped, which in his dialect translates to concern bordering on paternal. But Lydia was already retreating down the hallway. By the time I reached the door, she had vanished into the rain-slick street. I hesitated just long enough to grab my coat, glancing back at Wolfe. He gave a short nod, permission and command in one. "Go," he said, "but be prudent." Outside, the block was quiet in that uneasy New York way. Stillness wrapped around noise like a con man wearing respectability. Street lamps blurred in puddles. A taxi idled at the far corner, but no silhouette hurried toward it. I jogged down the sidewalk, checking vestibules, stoops, alleys. Nothing but rain, trash cans, and the perfume of bad timing. A newspaper blew across my foot with a headline about zoning fraud. Cute coincidence, or maybe not. I circled back to the corner taxi stand. Empty. The cabbie leaned against his fender, smoking like it was the only heat left in the universe. "See a woman come through here?" I asked. He exhaled a lazy cloud. "Nope. Haven't picked up anyone in 20 minutes. Great. Either Lydia had melted, been scooped into a passing car, or sprouted wings. None were reassuring options. I hurried back to the Brownstone. Wolfe was in the office, leaning forward in his chair, an indication of agitation equivalent to another man pacing holes into the carpet. "Well?" he demanded. "She didn't make it to the taxi stand." His lips pressed together in a way that made the room feel smaller. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with the weight of deduction settling in. "A woman who flees before finishing," he said quietly, "is a woman in peril." The way he said it made the air in the room stiffen. I hung my coat, sat on the edge of my desk, and wished I'd brought in reinforcements, or, better yet, a miracle. Then Wolfe reached for the bell cord, a tremor of ritual. "We will proceed," he said, "but I fear we are already too late." And that was the moment I realized the night had cracked open beneath us, revealing something dark, cold and buried, something that had already claimed one frightened archivist. The morning had the kind of grey, sour expression you'd expect on a man who had just discovered his bank balance was a practical joke. Manhattan does that sometimes, pulls the light back behind the clouds and leaves the streets looking like the city forgot to get dressed. I'd been circling the block since dawn, checking for any sign of Lydia Merrill or anything resembling her last known nerve endings. What I found instead, at 7:15, was Inspector Kramer standing by the curb with his coat collar turned up and his cigar pointing at the sky like it was responsible for all of this. He saw me before I could decide whether to slip past unnoticed. "Goodwin," he called, voice gravel ground through a coffee grinder. "Over here." The tone wasn't hostile. It wasn't friendly either. It was the sound a man makes when he's been awake too long and has seen something he'd rather not have learnt the vocabulary for. I walked over. "Morning, Inspector. You're up early. Or maybe you never went to bed. Either way, the Gazette will be crushed. They love beating you to a body." His jaw tightened, but he didn't take the bait. That alone told me something dire had occurred. Kramer not rising to one of my quips is like Wolfe skipping lunch. Technically possible, medically questionable. He gestured with the cigar toward the mouth of the alley. "They found her about an hour ago. Your runner from last night." My stomach did an unpleasant tilt. "Lydia Merrill?" He nodded. Neck snapped. Purse missing. No signs of a fight. "Snapped," I repeated. "That doesn't happen in friendly handshakes." "Save the commentary. The medical examiner hasn't spoken yet, but it looks clean. Quick, no panic." No panic because she was already panicked. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, and this close to the Brownstone. "That's why I'm here," he said flatly. "Before the papers print a headline about Wolfe's doorstep becoming a prime dump site, I want facts. Did she tell Wolfe anything? Did she bring anything? What was she doing here last night?" I kept my voice even. "You're asking like you already assume Wolfe is involved." He shot me a look. "I'm asking because Wolfe sits in the middle of this like a bull in a soup bowl. I'm not accusing him, but proximity matters." I nodded. "Fair enough." He lowered his voice. "Look, Goodwin, I don't like this one. She was scared, terrified. You know it, I know it. Someone followed her. That means whoever killed her wanted something, and wanted it badly." I glanced toward the alley, where uniforms milled like ants around a fallen sugar cube. She mentioned an artifact, a brass surveyor's. "Tag," Kramer finished. I blinked. "You found it?" "No, and that's the problem. Her purse is missing. Could be robbery, sure. Could also be someone wanting whatever she had in it." I tried a little needle, mostly out of habit. "Well, at least you beat the Gazette to the scene. That's something." He didn't even grunt. "Goodwin, did she give Wolfe anything?" I weighed the question. Wolfe doesn't lie, and he expects truth from me. "She gave us a brass tag, symbol carved into it, that's all. She was supposed to come back this morning with more." He exhaled, which sent his cigar tip glowing like a dying star. "You tell Wolfe I want anything she brought to him. Everything. No games." A pause, then more softly. "And tell him I know he didn't cause this." Kramer doesn't say things like that unless the ground is shifting under him. It was as close to respect as his vocal cords allow. "Care to tell me what angle you're taking?" I asked. "The only one I can afford," he muttered. "Homicide with political complications waiting to explode, and Wolfe's name floating too close for comfort." At that moment, Stebbins lumbered over, face like a disgruntled moose and twice as expressive. "Inspector, me wants you. Says the neck." "I know what the neck says," Kramer snapped, then turned to me. "Go. Tell Wolfe what I said, and tell him not to sit on anything." "Wolfe sits on everything," I said. "That's his natural position." Even Kramer's fatigue cracked a tiny puff of amusement. "Just get moving." I left them to their grim business and headed back to the Brownstone. Wolfe's plant rooms were off limits until 11, and that meant delivering news would require patience. Mine, not his. He believes orchid hours are sanctified, as untouchable as the Library of Alexandria or Fritz's butter inventory. The Brownstone felt heavier than usual when I entered. Fritz met me at the office doorway, his face tight with worry. "Is she—" "Yeah," I said quietly. "She's gone." His shoulders sagged. Fritz doesn't like violence anywhere near the Brownstone. He treats the place like a monastery where the only allowed disagreements are over pastry textures. I waited in the office, pacing, sipping coffee I didn't really taste, replaying Lydia's voice in my head. She'd been frantic, but not incoherent. Someone had followed her. Someone had taken the map. Someone had wanted that chamber kept hidden, and someone had snapped her neck with professional efficiency. At 11 sharp, the elevator hummed. Wolfe descended like a thundercloud in human form. When he stepped into the office, he didn't sit. He looked at me, reading the silence. "Well?" he said. Kramer found her, dead, half a block away. He closed his eyes, not dramatically, just a slow, weighted blink. When he opened them, the light had shifted. "Describe." I did. The alley, the missing purse, the lack of struggle, the missing tag, everything except my frustration, which he didn't need served for lunch. He went to his desk, sat heavily and extended his palm. "The tag," I handed it over. He held it between thumb and forefinger like it was a delicate botanical specimen. "This symbol," he murmured. "It reeks of municipal malfeasance. Late 19th century. Tammany's golden rot." "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said, "that if Miss Merrill found documentation of a chamber built during that era beneath this block, she uncovered something intended to remain unseen." "Something worth killing for," I added. He winced, barely perceptible. "Archie, had she remained here, under my protection, we don't know that staying would have saved her." His gaze cut to me, sharp as a pruning knife. "I am not indulging regret. I am acknowledging a fact," which, for Wolfe, meant guilt wrapped in Latin phrasing. He set the tag on the blotter. "We will proceed. You will visit her place of employment, speak with her supervisor, colleagues, retrieve copies of the surveyor records, if any remain." "Any preferences for charm level?" I asked. "Moderate, within legal boundaries, and scrubbed of your juvenile tendency to preen." I saluted with the coffee cup. "Yes, sir." He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared instantly. "Lunch," Wolfe said, "in 10 minutes." It was barely 11:15. Wolfe eating early was as rare as snow in July, which told me more about his mood than any monologue could have. As Fritz vanished to the kitchen, Wolfe leaned back. "Archie." "Yes?" "You will keep me informed of every detail. I do not want another lapse." There it was, the protectiveness he'd deny until his final breath. I nodded. "You'll know everything before Kramer does." Wolfe grunted. "See that you manage it without provoking the police." Before I could reply, the doorbell rang, 3 short, angry jabs, probably a reporter or a politician who smelled blood in the water. I stood. "Shall I get that?" Wolfe nodded once, cautiously, which meant danger hasn't passed. As I stepped toward the vestibule, I felt the air tighten behind me, Wolfe watching, listening, prepared to intervene if needed. And with Lydia dead, a killer nearby, and a brass tag glowing like a curse on Wolfe's desk, I had the uncomfortable certainty that the alley wasn't the only foundation cracking under our feet. The Historical Reclamation Project offices looked like a library that had lost a knife fight. When I pushed open the glass door late that morning, the smell of mildew, glue, and ambition hit me square in the nose like a damp handshake. Rows of metal cabinets leaned against the walls as if they had been interrogated all night, and the shelves sagged under the weight of maps that hadn't seen fresh air since Grover Cleveland's first term. If the place had a budget, it was being spent on dust. A woman at the reception desk glanced up at me with the expression of someone who had been told hope was discontinued. "Help you?" she asked, not sounding enthusiastic about the possibility. "I'm here to see Martha Kell," I said. "Archie Goodwin, Manhattan Independent Research." That title works better than detective, especially among nervous bureaucrats. It suggests ink smudges instead of handcuffs. She pointed toward a frosted glass door. "Supervisor's office, she's in." I knocked once, then entered before anyone could object. The office was barely larger than Wolfe's dictionary stand, and twice as stressed. A woman in her mid-40s sat behind a battered wooden desk. Martha Kell had sharp cheekbones, sharper eyes, and the posture of someone accustomed to bracing for impact. Her desk drawers were locked, which was always a welcome sign for a man in my line of work. "Miss Kell?" I said. She looked me over without standing. "Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin, Miss Lydia Merrill's associate." I let the pause do the heavy lifting. A flicker, too fast for grief, too controlled for surprise. "I see. What do you want?" "I want to understand what she was working on before she died. You were her supervisor." She inhaled, eyes narrowing. "Lydia was fine yesterday. Perfectly fine. She didn't mention any trouble, and I resent the implication she would confide in you before me." "That's fair. People rarely confide in me unless they're desperate or intoxicated." I smiled and took a chair without waiting to be offered one. It squeaked in protest. "But she showed up at my employer's door last night in a rainstorm looking for help." Martha stiffened. "Help? With what?" "That's the question of the morning." I leaned in. She'd found something important, something somebody didn't want her to have. "Ridiculous," Martha snapped. "Lydia was diligent but prone to dramatics." I raised an eyebrow. She didn't strike me as the swooning type. "You knew her for how long? 2 hours?" "Less," I admitted, "but terror's hard to fake." Martha's fingers drummed once on her desk, then stopped. Her gaze darted briefly to the locked drawer. A tiny flicker, but not tiny enough. I let the silence breathe. People fill silence with truth or lies. Either will do for me. What was she working on? I asked. A set of old blueprints. Nothing special. Parcel histories from the late 1800s. She was cross-checking them against modern zoning files. Martha's tone was firm, but her eyes were doing the Charleston toward that drawer again. Which parcels? Various? I don't recall exactly. I'm sure you don't. I gave her my best polite grin, the kind Wolfe calls adolescent stratagem when he's feeling affectionate. Mind if I take a peek at her desk? Yes, I mind. Those are confidential records. Inspector Kramer can arrange a warrant, I said casually, but he's not in a rosy mood today. Her lips thinned. Lydia valued her privacy. Dead people usually do, but they rarely get it. Before she could come up with a retort vicious enough to put a shine on her morning, a man drifted into the doorway like a lost scarf. Gaunt, pale, and sharp around the edges, he had the appearance of someone who collected overdue library fines for a hobby. His suit was a size too big, and his Adam's apple bobbed as if auditioning for a role. "Martha?" he asked, voice reed thin. Then he noticed me. "Oh, who's this?" "Alan Phipps," Martha said stiffly. "Freelancer. Mr. Goodwin, this is Mr. Phipps." Phipps stared at me the way a nervous pigeon stares at a cat. "You're from the police?" "Sometimes they wish I were," I said. "Mostly they wish I'd join a monastery." He stepped into the office. "I heard about Lydia. Terrible, awful. But she wasn't careful. She poked into things that didn't concern her." That caught my ear. "Such as?" He swallowed. "Oh, you know. She always wanted to impress the higher-ups, digging through maps other people ignored, asking too many questions." "About what?" He flinched. I don't know exactly," which meant he knew something exactly. I stood. "Miss Kell, I'll be taking a look at Lydia's workspace. If you object, feel free to summon a higher power." She didn't stop me. I suspect she calculated that blocking me would attract more heat than letting me poke around. Lydia's desk was in the far corner of the second room, squeezed between two metal cabinets that gave it the look of a trapped animal. The drawer handles were cold, locked. I turned back to Martha. "Key?" "No." "Then I'll need authorization to pick the lock." "You'll get neither." I nodded. "Fine, then I'll check the outgoing request log." That was public enough that even she couldn't block it. I scanned the ledger laid out on the side table, 5 days' worth of checkout slips, and there, in Lydia's tight, neat handwriting, a list. Blueprint, West 35th Street block, lots 14, 15, 17, blueprint, sub-basement access schematics, 1874, structural additions, Tammany Plaza region, 1870s. Lots 14 and 15 corresponded to Wolfe's Brownstone and the building east of us. I didn't like that coincidence. Coincidences that hit close to home generally involve explosives, metaphorical or otherwise. Phipps hovered behind me. "She shouldn't have requested those," he muttered. "Why not?" I asked without turning. "They're old, unreliable, misfiled, dangerous to interpret incorrectly." "Maps don't kill people, Mr. Phipps," he jerked. I didn't say they did. His tone added, but someone might, though he didn't voice it. I continued digging. Another slip. Surveyor Ledger, 1874, requested by Lydia 3 days ago. I followed the notation to a metal drawer. Inside, predictably, the ledger was gone. In its place was a photostat copy with several pages marked. One symbol circled, the same circle bisected by a vertical line we had seen on the brass tag. I removed the photostat, borrowing it the legal way, by signing the checkout sheet. Wolfe would be pleased, or less displeased than usual. I went back to Martha's office. "Miss Kell, did Lydia discuss these symbols with you?" "No." "Did she mention she'd been followed?" Martha's composure wavered. "Followed? By whom?" "That's what I'm trying to determine," Phipps cut in. "Lydia was afraid of her." We both looked at him. Martha bristled. "What nonsense!" Phipps lifted his thin shoulders. "She said you pressured her, that you didn't want her digging through the old surveys." "That's because she misfiled them," Martha snapped. "And you know it." The red herring wagged its tail, but it wasn't barking in the right language. Whatever Lydia feared last night, it wasn't a slap on the wrist from her supervisor. I thanked them both with all the warmth of a January icicle and headed out. The receptionist watched me pass with the expression of someone tracking a flu symptom. Back outside, Manhattan's air tasted metallic. I hailed a cab and headed home. When I entered the Brownstone at noon, Wolfe was already in the office, jaw set, fingers steepled like a lawyer preparing to prosecute the universe. "You're early," he said. "I skipped the scenic route." "Report." So I did, every detail. The locked drawer, the glances, the missing ledger, the photostat, the blueprints requesting our block, Phipps's nerves, Martha's rigidity. Wolfe listened with the delicate poise of a man balancing annoyance with curiosity. When I mentioned flirting with Martha to soften her up, he snorted. "Your adolescent stratagems are tiresome, but occasionally serviceable." "That's practically a love letter," I said. He ignored that. "Did she lie?" "Yes." "Distinctly?" "As distinctly as Fritz's paprika." He grunted. "Proceed." Before I could finish, the phone rang. Not the doorbell, thank goodness, but the office line. I answered. Kramer's voice came through, low and tired. "Goodwin. Put Wolfe on." Wolfe raised an eyebrow but took the receiver. "Yes, Inspector." A pause as Kramer explained something heavily. Wolfe's face shifted, but only slightly. "Ransacked?" Wolfe repeated. "Yet one item left untouched. What item?" Another pause. "An 1894 map of West 35th Street. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Bring it." A gruff assent crackled through the line, followed by a begrudging, "You'll read it better than my boys." "Indeed," Wolfe said smoothly. He hung up. I straightened. "Kramer's bringing you the map?" "Yes. Miss Merrill's apartment was searched thoroughly, but the intruder ignored a document of significance, which is odd." "Why ignore it?" I asked. "That," Wolfe said, "is the question upon which our next move depends." Fritz appeared silently at the doorway. "Lunch is ready." Wolfe stood. "We will continue after we eat." That ritual closure meant one thing. The storm was only beginning. Rain has a way of tattling on a man. When Inspector Kramer showed up at the Brownstone at 2:30 that afternoon, the weather had stitched his trench coat to his skin and plastered his fedora to his head in a way that suggested he had not only walked through the downpour, but argued with it. The doorbell rang 3 times, sharp, official, and annoyed. I opened the door to find him standing there like a wet subpoena. "Goodwin," he grunted. "I've got something for Wolfe." "Unless it's dry socks, he won't be grateful," I said. "Come in." He stomped into the vestibule, shaking off droplets with the enthusiasm of a disgruntled St. Bernard. Under one arm he carried a long cardboard tube, sealed with red tape, the 1894 map. That object put a crease in even my morning cynicism. I led him to the office. Wolfe was at his desk, appearing tranquil only because he'd not yet spoken. The rain tapping the windows made a delicate counterpoint to the inspector's entrance, which carried all the delicacy of an armoured truck. "Inspector," Wolfe said, voice cool, "you look afflicted." "I'm fine," Kramer replied, which meant he wasn't. He slid the tube onto Wolfe's desk. "This is what we found in Merrill's apartment. Everything else was a cyclone. This wasn't touched, not a fingerprint." Wolfe grunted, reached for his letter opener, and slit the tape. He withdrew an enormous sheet of yellowing paper, unfurling it with care. The detail was astonishing. Street grids, sewer lines, foundation sketches, and notations in tight Victorian handwriting. I leaned over his shoulder. "If that thing shows an untapped oil field under your chair, I'm putting in for a raise." "Pfui," Wolfe murmured, eyes scanning. "This map predates the current water mains. Fascinating. Look here." He pointed to a faint line running beneath 3 buildings, including ours, a corridor about 5 feet wide. Kramer frowned. "We thought it was a sewer branch." "No," Wolfe said sharply. "Note the angle, and the layered brickwork notation. This is no sewer, this is a sealed passage." I tilted my head. "A secret hallway? Under our feet? That's one way to spice up real estate." "Spare me your embroidery, Archie," Wolfe said. "The corridor terminates here." He tapped a square symbol drawn at the end, the same circle bisected by a vertical line, the Tammany marker Lydia had shown us. "A chamber," Wolfe breathed. "A private vault, built during the height of Tammany's ascendancy." Kramer rubbed his face. "Damn, That's what I was afraid of. You knew? I asked. I knew Lydia was prepping a report, he said quietly. A big one. She said it would expose zoning fraud tied to an old political family. She wouldn't name which, but she was scared. Scared enough to ask me, off the record, how fast a sealed sub-basement can be condemned. Wolfe looked up. And you didn't think to tell me this earlier? I didn't know she was dead, Kramer growled, or that you were mixed up in it. Mixed up, Wolfe snapped. Inspector, I sit here. I do not gallivant across Manhattan committing mischief. When murder grazes my doorstep, you are hardly justified in insinuating— I didn't insinuate anything, Kramer snapped back. You're the one sitting over a secret Tammany vault, which I haven't opened. And don't, Kramer said firmly. That silenced the room. Even the rain quieted as if waiting to see which man would blink first. Wolfe placed the map flat on the desk and tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared at the doorway silently. 2 beers, Wolfe said. Chilled. 1 for the inspector. He needs it. Kramer looked startled. It's not even 3. You are drenched and overwrought, Wolfe said. Beer will not impair your performance. I smothered a grin. Wolfe rarely hands out beer during working hours, and when he does, it's either an olive branch or a declaration of war. Kramer seemed uncertain which category he belonged to. When Fritz returned with the tray, Kramer took the beer, muttering something about doctor's orders and cold weather. Wolfe ignored him and returned to studying the map. This, Wolfe announced, tapping the symbol again, is no mere architectural curiosity. This chamber was constructed deliberately, concealed purposefully, and maintained secretly. Lydia Merrill stumbled upon its existence. That discovery killed her. Kramer sighed. I know. You admit it? I admit someone wanted to shut her up. I admit someone didn't want that chamber noticed, but I don't know who or why. And the building owners? Wolfe pressed. 3 properties, Kramer said. 1 owned by the city, 1 tied to a holding company I've never heard of, and 1, yours, purchased clean in 32. I saw Wolfe's mouth tighten. My possession of this building is wholly legitimate. Relax, Kramer said. I'm not accusing you. I'm saying someone else with interest in that chamber might have killed her. Including her colleagues, Wolfe said. Kramer grunted. Or someone in city zoning, or the Veer real estate family, or some long-forgotten Tammany heir trying to erase ancient sins. I jumped in. We should bring Saul. Wolfe nodded curtly. Archie, call Mr. Pantzer. I phoned Saul, who answered as if he'd been expecting the summons. Within 20 minutes he arrived in his flat cap and quiet confidence, taking a seat near the globe without making a ripple. Wolfe briefed him concisely. Trace the provenance of this map. Determine who handled it in the past 20 years. Investigate the holding company owning the adjacent parcel, and observe all our suspects without being observed. Saul nodded. Fee? Your standard, Wolfe said, plus a $50 bonus for expedition. Done. Saul left as silently as he came. Meanwhile, Kramer leaned back and exhaled. Wolfe, Lydia's report, whatever she was writing, could nail someone powerful. Somebody with sway over zoning. Somebody with resources. Somebody with fear, Wolfe corrected him. Power without fear does not resort to murder. The rain intensified, drumming on the window panes like a stenographer hammering out a confession. I glanced at Wolfe. We could check the basement. If the chamber connects— No, Wolfe snapped, eyes flashing. Archie, I forbid you to explore foundation structures without proper reconnaissance. You will not place yourself in jeopardy. That tone could have bent steel. It wasn't anger. It was fear dressed as command. I raised my hands. All right, I'll avoid dark tunnels until further notice. Kramer's eyes flicked between us, reading more in Wolfe's voice than Wolfe would ever admit. Look, Kramer said quietly, I'm not here to fight. You know Lydia came to you. You know she had something dangerous. I need whatever she gave you. Wolfe met his stare head-on. She gave us a brass surveyor's tag, symbol identical to that on the map. You may examine it, but it remains here. Kramer nodded. Fair. In a rare moment of mutual human recognition, Wolfe said, softer than usual, You are tired, Inspector. Kramer's mouth twitched. So are you. Don't get in my way. For Wolfe, that was practically camaraderie. Kramer stood, adjusting his raincoat. I'll be back tomorrow. Maybe with a warrant, maybe with coffee. Coffee is preferable, Wolfe said. Kramer left without slamming the door. Wolfe sat back, steepling his fingers. Archie, take dictation. I rolled to my desk, pulled a sheet from the drawer and touched the typewriter keys. Wolfe began listing interview targets. City clerks, property historians, surveyors' descendants, zoning officials, and one Anthony Veer, ruthless real estate heir with a reputation for smoothing political wrinkles with money. When Wolfe finished, I stacked the notes. Anything else? Yes, he said. Be swift. If Miss Merrill died for discovering this chamber, others may follow. I stood, stretching. Fine. I'll pack a shovel, a flashlight, and if I find one, a discount priest. Wolfe glared. Archie. Yes? Do not improvise. Too late, I said, grabbing my coat, and hoping the walls of this brownstone weren't listening. If you want to know how humid Manhattan gets on a summer night, try wearing a suit while carrying a reputation. By 8:40 that evening, the air had taken on the consistency of lukewarm soup, and the sidewalks glistened like they'd been buffed by an overzealous mortician. I'd stepped out for a walk, not because Wolfe asked me to, but because his mood since lunch had been enough to make wallpaper flinch. The map, the chamber, Lydia's death, they wrapped around him like vines, and when Wolfe stews, it's better to give him space to simmer. I was halfway down the block when I saw it, a dark sedan parked across from the brownstone, angled just a little too perfectly, pretending innocence the way a pickpocket pretends politeness. A shape sat behind the wheel, a man trying to look bored. But when a guy watches a building without watching it, he might as well carry a neon sign blinking suspicious in 5 languages. I crossed the street casually, as if out for a stroll through a tropical swamp. As I got close, the sedan's occupant stiffened before plastering on a bureaucratic smile that fooled absolutely no one. Evening, I said, leaning down toward the window. Beautiful night for bird watching. He blinked. I'm sorry? You've been looking at the brownstone like it owes you money. Figured you were waiting for it to sprout wings. He hesitated, then extended a clammy hand. Nathan Rowan, City Inspection Office, just checking zoning alignment. Routine. I laughed, not politely. If that's your routine, the city's got bigger problems than crooked basements. Rowan's eyes darted down the street, as if hoping a rescue would appear wearing an official seal. No luck. Look, I'm not doing anything wrong. There's been some confusion about parcel records in this district. Aha, let me clear something up. That's Nero Wolfe's brownstone. If you're spying on him, you're late to the party. People have been trying for years. He swallowed. I'm not spying. I was asked to verify certain zoning discrepancies. By whom? By the department. I tapped the roof of his sedan with a knuckle. Try again. His throat worked like a reluctant elevator. Political office. That's vague. That's intentional. The neon from a nearby diner flickered across his windshield, reflecting off the sheen of sweat collecting on his forehead. Behind us, a couple of kids shouted over a pinball machine through the open door. Rowan managed a weak smile. Look, he said, I'm not trying to cause trouble. No, I said, you're trying to avoid it. And failing. He winced. All right, fine. Lydia Merrill came to me a week ago. She asked for a permit to inspect the ground beneath your building. I denied it. Why? Because I was told to deny it. By the same political office? He nodded miserably. His collar looked like it was strangling him. She said she found something concerning, that she needed to confirm the depth of some old structure, something to do with Tammany-era files. And you didn't think to ask more questions? Goodwin, I have a wife and 2 children, he whispered. Sometimes that means not asking questions. That admission had the flavor of truth, not the heroic kind, but the kind real people choke on when cornered. His hands trembled on the wheel. I leaned in slightly. Did you follow her last night? No. His panic came out too fast to be rehearsed. I wasn't anywhere near here. I was home. My wife can confirm it. Then why the surveillance? He hesitated. Because someone told me she might have left something with Wolfe, something dangerous, something that could cause a political incident. A secret chamber under a block of buildings will do that, I said dryly. Rowan's pupils jumped. So she really did find it? Maybe. I stepped back. And maybe you're sitting out here waiting to find out what we know. His silence answered more than his words. I pulled a small notebook from my inside pocket, not for intimidation, but because people talk more when they see pencils moving. Wolfe likes to pretend I do these things purely out of duty, but the truth is I enjoy watching nervous men sweat. Call it a professional hobby. Who pressured you to deny her permit? I can't say. You won't say. He swallowed again. Both. He wasn't the killer, not unless he had mastered the art of being in two places at once. Lydia had been murdered while Rowan was eating pot roast with his family in Queens, according to the timestamp he later provided, and Stebbins begrudgingly confirmed. That made Rowan a coward, not a strangler. But cowards know things, and sometimes they live long enough to tell them. I took a long look at him. If you're smart, you'll stop parking outside that house. You're waving a red flag at a very large and very irritable bull. You think I want to be here? He whispered urgently. I'm terrified. They told me to check if anything changed, if Wolfe moved something. Wolfe doesn't move things, I said. Wolfe has things moved for him. He blinked. I mean, if he found something. Well, I asked, what if he did? Rowan's face turned ashen. Then someone important is in danger. Or already guilty. The sedan door creaked as he shifted. Goodwin, I shouldn't even be talking to you. Please, don't tell them I said anything. Who's them? But he wasn't answering that one. A pair of headlights swung around the corner and he flinched like they were firing squads. I have to go. Fine, I said, but stay out of alleys. They're not healthy this week. He drove off without another word, tires hissing on wet pavement. I watched him tail-light his way down the block, looking like a man heading toward a fate the city had pre-written in 6 different departments. When I returned to the Brownstone, Wolfe was waiting in the office like a thundercloud wearing a vest. He studied my face for 2 seconds, then demanded, "Report!" I gave it to him. The spying, the political pressure, Rowan's denial, his fear, and the denied permit. Wolfe listened without comment, but his features tightened the way they do when he's calculating pressure points across the city grid. When I finished, he said, "You will not approach this man again alone." I blinked. Why not? Because he is either bait or prey, Wolfe snapped. Both attract predators. You're worried for my safety, I said lightly. No, he growled. I am worried for my efficiency. If you are incapacitated, I must deal with police idiocy myself. Which, loosely translated from Wolfe speak, meant, yes, Archie, I am worried about you, but I will die before admitting it sincerely. I grinned. If you insist. I do. Fritz appeared silently at the doorway. How a man that size walks noiselessly is one of life's mysteries. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes, sir. Wolfe waved him away. Very well. Before I could take off my coat, the phone rang. Wolfe gestured sharply and I grabbed it. Goodwin. It was Saul Pantzer. Archie, found something. Saul never wastes syllables. Shoot. Anonymous cash withdrawal, yesterday afternoon, $200, Lydia Merrill. That's not pocket change. No. And she didn't spend it. The envelope was found in her room, untouched. Meaning she planned something, I said. Or someone paid her to keep quiet, Saul murmured. Either way, she never used it. My stomach tightened. Thanks, Saul. Keep digging. I hung up and relayed the detail. Wolfe's eyes darkened. $200. Substantial enough for corruption, insufficient for escape. Maybe someone paid her to stop her report, I said. Or she withdrew it to protect someone else. Or to bribe someone, Wolfe countered. Before we could analyze further, the doorbell rang. Once. Hard. I went to the vestibule. A uniformed officer stood there. Hatfield, one of Kramer's newer recruits, face pale as skim milk. Goodwin, he said, breath quick. Inspector Kramer sent me. We found someone. Who? Nathan Rowan. My pulse jerked. Alive? Barely. Alley off 9th. Same spot the woman was found. I grabbed my coat. Let Wolfe know. Tell him I'm heading there. Hatfield nodded and hurried off. I ran back to the office. Wolfe, Rowan's been attacked. He froze only for an instant. Archie, be prudent. I nodded once sharply and was out the door in seconds, the brownstone looming behind me like a worried sentinel. The alley was cordoned with police tape. Flashlights cut through shadows like interrogation blades. Rowan lay on the pavement, bruised, bleeding, and breathing shallowly. Paramedics worked in grim silence. Stebbins glanced at me. He's alive. For now. What happened? Someone wanted him quiet, Stebbins said bluntly. Same as the girl. Rowan's eyes fluttered open. He saw me. His lips moved. Goodwin, he croaked. They know about the chamber. Who? I leaned down, but he slipped under again before he could answer. I stood there, rain beginning to fall, and realized Manhattan wasn't just bearing its sins. Someone was digging them back up and killing anyone who got too close. If New York had a heart, it beat somewhere underground, loud, metallic, and annoyed. That thought occurred to me around 9:30 the next morning as I jogged down the steps into a derelict access tunnel at the foot of West 35th. Kramer had phoned the Brownstone at 9:15 sharp, skipping the pleasantries he wasn't very good at anyway. Goodwin, he'd barked, tell Wolfe to sit tight. I want you down here, now. Then he'd hung up without specifying what here meant. Luckily for me, the tone of Kramer's voice had enough coordinates baked into it that I could navigate. The air in the tunnel tasted like rust, old water, and things that never got daylight. A couple of cops stood guard with flashlights slicing through the dark like irritated sabers. Then I saw Kramer. He looked like he'd been awake since Roosevelt's first term, cigar jammed between his teeth like it was responsible for every corpse in Manhattan. Goodwin, he said, over here. I moved toward the circle of light. At first I thought it was debris, or maybe a sleeping vagrant. But then the shape resolved, and there he was, Alan Phipps, Lydia's gaunt, jittery colleague. On his back, eyes half-lidded, neck twisted, the blank expression of a man whose last thought probably involved regret. A medic knelt beside him, shaking his head. Been dead at least 2 hours. I crouched, keeping my voice level. Phipps, here? Kramer grunted. Yeah, and your guess is as good as mine how he got in. This tunnel isn't supposed to be accessible. Supposed to be is doing a lot of work, I said. Stebbins lumbered up like a disapproving ox. We found a photostat in his pocket. I took the bagged sheet he held out, careful not to smudge anything. It was another copy of the 1894 map, same as the one from Lydia's apartment, but this one had an extra mark circled in red pencil. A second chamber, not the vault at the end of the corridor. This was a hidden extension branching from the sealed passage. Where'd he get this? I muttered. That's your department, Kramer said, exhaling smoke. Mine is figuring out why he was down here and who broke his neck. The tunnel lights flickered. Farther in, the walls showed evidence of recent movement. Bricks shifted, dust disturbed, the faint smell of fresh mortar. Someone had been opening and closing doors that didn't officially exist. Kramer rubbed his forehead. Wolfe knew something was off about those old maps. I should have expected more secrets. Should have, I said. Kramer, this case has more surprises than Wolfe has pajamas. He gave me a look that could have filed metal. Don't start. We stood there, staring down at Phipps, a man with debts, resentment, and nothing to lose, except apparently his life. I straightened. Inspector, Phipps told me yesterday Lydia was afraid of Martha Kell. Kramer snorted. Yeah? Well, unless Miss Kell moonlights as a tunnel-dwelling strangler, that doesn't track. That's what worries me, I said. He pointed in the wrong direction. Red herring. Or maybe he was covering for someone, Kramer said. Or maybe he was next on the list. A shiver rippled through the tunnel's stale air. Kramer jerked a thumb toward the exit. Go tell Wolfe. He'll want this firsthand. And I need your report before the DA starts sniffing around. I headed back into the sunlight, which hit like an interrogation lamp. By the time I reached the Brownstone at 10:30, Wolfe was emerging from the elevator, orchid hours completed. He glanced at my face, which must have been an ad for caffeine and trouble, and said, You are late. Inspector Kramer sends his regards, I said, along with a fresh corpse. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Who? Alan Phipps. Same treatment as Lydia. Neck. Quick. Clean. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Report. I gave every detail. The tunnel, the fresh mortar, the second chamber, the photostat, the cold truth of Phipps's fear. Wolfe listened in grim silence, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair in slow, controlled beats. And, I added, handing him the bagged photostat, this. He took it gingerly. When he saw the red circle marking the second chamber, he inhaled sharply. Imbeciles. Meddling imbeciles. They have awakened something venal. That's one way to put it. He glared at me. Do not trivialize this, Archie. Whoever murders to conceal the existence of such chambers, chambers built to harbour Tammany secrets, will not hesitate to continue. Then we're in their way. Precisely, Wolfe said, and I do not enjoy being in anyone's way. We were interrupted by the doorbell. 3 modest rings, not the kind that try to break bones. I opened the door to reveal Saul Pantzer. His expression, as usual, gave nothing away. "Saul," I said, "you look like a man who found something unpleasant." He stepped inside. "You could say that." Wolfe gestured him into the office. Saul sat, removed his cap, and spoke in his calm, measured cadence. "Lydia visited a bank the afternoon before she died. Withdrew $200 in cash." "We know that," I said. "Yes," Saul replied, "but what you don't know is that she left with someone." Wolfe sat up straighter. "Whom?" "A man using an alias," Saul said. "But I traced him. Alan Phipps." I let out a whistle. "So he was with her?" "Not for long," Saul said. "They split up after half a block. He walked east. She walked west." "Did he take the cash?" Wolfe asked. "No. She had the envelope when she died." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. He was not collaborating then. Saul nodded. "Before you ask, no. Phipps didn't kill her. Timeline's wrong. He was on the other side of the city when she was attacked." "A false lead then," I said. "Maybe intentional." "Possibly," Saul agreed. "But here's something else. Phipps spent the last 2 nights asking around about old foundations, specifically this block." "That explains the tunnel," I muttered. Saul continued. "He told a bartender he was closing in on something big. The bartender assumed he meant gambling, not structural corruption." Wolfe groaned quietly. "A fool's bravado. He threatened the wrong person." I added, "and someone silenced him for it." Wolfe leaned forward. "Saul, discover who accessed the tunnel recently, and determine who encouraged Miss Merrill to withdraw money, and find any connection between Phipps and Anthony Vere." Saul simply nodded. "All right." Then he stood and left without ceremony. The moment the door clicked shut, Wolfe's expression darkened further. "You will not," Wolfe said abruptly, "go anywhere near that tunnel alone." I blinked. I wasn't planning to take a lantern and spelunk. "You jest," Wolfe snapped, "but I am not at liberty to lose you." He said it like one would say I am not at liberty to lose a priceless book, but with enough warmth to tell me it wasn't just asset protection. "Fine," I said. "No tunnels unless accompanied by a Boy Scout troop." "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Be serious." "All right," I said softly. "No tunnels alone." Wolfe exhaled, dissatisfaction etched in every line. "We proceed." At 11:40 the phone rang again. This time Kramer didn't bother with greetings. "Goodwin, we checked Phipps's room. Someone tossed it. Same MO as Lydia's apartment. They're scrubbing." "I figured," Kramer growled. "We also found scratch marks on the inside of the tunnel wall." "Scratch marks?" "Fresh ones, like someone was trying to wedge a brick loose or signal something." "That's charming," I said. "Maybe the killer left an autograph." "Don't joke, Goodwin," Kramer snapped. But the snap lacked venom. It sounded like fatigue wearing a badge. "Anything else?" "Yeah," he muttered. "I don't like this. Wolfe is right. This isn't ordinary corruption. It's big. Bigger than zoning offices and city clerks." "Then brace yourself," I said. "Big means dangerous." "Don't I know it?" he sighed. "Tell Wolfe. I'll keep him updated." He hung up. Wolfe had heard every word. "Inspector Kramer is nearing the limits of his patience." "Be fair," I said. "We're all nearing limits." "Not I," Wolfe sniffed. "I have reserves." "Like a camel," I offered. "Phooey." I sat, rubbing my eyes. "So what do we do now? Wait for the killer to send us a greeting card?" "No," Wolfe declared. "We examine the full consequence of a second chamber." He pointed to the new photostat. "This hidden vault likely contains documents implicating individuals of influence. If those documents were removed, someone now possesses leverage, or fear. Maybe both." "Indeed." We spent the next half hour parsing probabilities. Wolfe dictated notes while I typed, consolidating timelines, connections, and the growing pattern of danger. The rhythmic clack of the typewriter keys kept the tension from strangling the room. At 12:30, Wolfe called lunch early. A bad sign. Fritz's veal stew smelled heavenly, but even that couldn't drown the taste of unfolding disaster. After lunch, Wolfe returned to the office, settling into his chair with the weight of a man ready to do serious thinking. I resumed my post by the desk. If there's one thing I've learned working for Nero Wolfe, it's that the city of New York contains more hidden pockets than a magician's tuxedo, and none of them ever hold a rabbit. That was the thought that strutted through my head at 10 minutes past 3 as Saul Panther and I stood outside a condemned property half a block from the Brownstone, a brick carcass leaning against its neighbours like it had finally admitted defeat. A faded sign announced the building had been pending renovation since before I first learned to tie my shoes. Its windows were boarded, its door wore 3 padlocks, and the whole place felt like it had secrets sweating behind the plaster. Saul picked the locks with the casual competence of a man tuning a violin. "Wolfe was clear," he murmured as the last padlock clicked open. "Look only. Don't enter anything unstable." "Sure," I said. "We're spelunking scouts. You go first, and if the basement swallows you whole, I'll write a charming obituary." He smirked. Saul's smirks are rarer than Wolfe skipping dessert. "Just stay behind me." Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of abandoned dreams. Floorboards creaked like they were protesting our intrusion. The staircase to the basement waited at the far end of a narrow hallway, leaning into darkness. I flicked on my flashlight. It illuminated motes of dust swirling like lost souls with nowhere better to drift. The basement was worse. Dirt floor, cracked foundation, beams that looked like the city had forgotten them decades ago. It was a perfect setting for either a mystery or a tetanus advertisement. Saul moved with the kind of precise caution that belongs to people who have survived long careers in dangerous lines of work. "The map placed the corridor behind the eastern wall," he said quietly. 8 feet in. "Wonderful," I replied. "That gives us exactly 8 feet of real estate in which to avoid being crushed by falling masonry." We crossed the basement slowly. I played my flashlight across the walls until it hit something different, a curvature interrupting the monotony of brick. An archway, bricked over completely. "There," Saul said. He crouched beside it, brushing away loose debris. The flashlight revealed fresh mortar dust on the floor, white, powdery, and recent enough to smudge under his fingertips. "Someone was here," Saul murmured. "Not long ago. Days, maybe hours." I scanned the rubble. Something gleamed faintly. I reached down and picked up a small, broken piece of brass. Its curved edge and worn symbol told me exactly what it had been. "Lydia's tag had a twin," I said. "Or maybe this was the original." Saul examined it. Broken, probably when they opened the wall. He sniffed lightly, then frowned. "Smell that?" I inhaled. Under the dust and damp, a sharp tang prickled my nose, chemical, acrid, unmistakable. "Paint thinner." "Or document solvent," Saul said. "Someone destroyed paper down here." Which meant someone had accessed the chamber, the same chamber Wolfe mapped with Lydia's notes. Someone had opened it, taken something or burned something, then closed it. We explored the perimeter, but didn't break the arch. Wolfe's orders. The last thing I needed was to collapse a century-old tunnel and become a permanent fixture of West 35th's architectural history. "All right," I said. "We've seen enough to ruin Wolfe's afternoon." Saul nodded. "We should go." Back at the Brownstone, Wolfe's expression hovered between volcanic and apocalyptic. He gestured sharply. "Report." I laid out everything. The bricked-over archway, the fresh mortar dust, the brass fragment, the chemical smell. Saul added his observations, steady and spare. Wolfe listened, face darkening like a storm cloud absorbing lightning. "So," Wolfe said finally, "someone accessed a chamber built illegally under Manhattan and had the means to conceal that trespass. Whoever they are, they possess influence." "Political influence," I said, "the kind that can bury a room and a few people along the way." Wolfe's eyes flicked to the broken brass piece on the desk. They retrieved something, or destroyed it. Such actions require purpose and fear. Saul added, "And knowledge. You don't open a hidden vault by accident." Wolfe's glare travelled between the two of us. "You obeyed my instructions?" "We didn't chip a pebble," I assured him. "Don't worry, I didn't bring a pickaxe." "Phooey." He shifted in his chair. "Archie, have you eaten?" "Breakfast," I said. "And nerves." "Fool," he muttered. "Go to the kitchen. Ask Fritz." He was interrupted by the telephone, a jagged ring that sliced the tension. I grabbed it. Goodwin. It was Kramer. Rowan's awake. Good. Can he talk? He talked, Kramer said grimly. He named someone. My pulse ticked once. Who? Martha Kell. I nearly dropped the receiver. The supervisor? That's what he said. I turned to Wolfe. Rowan says Kell threatened Lydia. Wolfe's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. Inconvenient. But not impossible. Kramer continued. But, before you start pointing fingers, Rowan took a turn. Internal injuries. He died 10 minutes ago. Damn. Yeah, damn is right. Kramer exhaled smoke I could imagine but not see. Goodwin, I don't buy it. Kell's a bureaucrat. She doesn't crack skulls in alleyways. A red herring, I said, tossed to Rowan before someone tried to kill him. Maybe, but I need to follow it anyway. Wolfe will understand. I'll tell him, I said. See that you do, Kramer growled, though without real bite. And tell him I'll call when I have more. And Goodwin? Yeah? Be careful. He hung up. I relayed the news. Wolfe listened, eyelids narrowing like shutters. Martha Kell, he said. Rowan was afraid. Vulnerable. Easily manipulated. That accusation may be truthful or planted. Rowan probably didn't know the difference, I said. Wolfe drummed his fingers. Miss Kell is timid, but timidity can flourish beside cruelty. Meaning? Meaning, Wolfe said. We must examine her, and every other hand that touched those maps. Saul stood. I'll keep digging. Do so, Wolfe said. And Saul, be subtle. Saul's smile was barely a breeze. I usually am. When he left, the office felt heavier. I paced, unable to sit still, while Wolfe brooded with the solemnity of a man drafting a treaty between warring nations. What now? I asked. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Now, Archie, we prepare. For what? For a battle between truth and power, he said quietly, and power does not lose gracefully. I sat, rubbing my jaw. So we keep digging. No, Wolfe snapped. You stay above ground. I will not have you spelunking in unstable passages. That was one time, I said. Technically two. Archie. His voice dipped. Soft, dangerous. Do not jest. I forbid it. He meant it, and I'd pushed enough for one afternoon. All right, I said. No tunnels. I'll stick to suspects who don't live in walls. He exhaled, some tension slipping from his shoulders. The phone rang again. Wolfe sighed. Answer it. I did. Goodwin, said Saul's familiar voice. One more thing. Shoot. Fresh tyre marks near the condemned property. Expensive treads. Not Phipps, not Rowan. Someone with money was there within the past 12 hours. Veer, I guessed. Could be, Saul said. Could be someone higher. Wonderful, I muttered. We've got a scavenger hunt hosted by the city's elite. Saul hung up. I turned to Wolfe. Someone rich was poking around the chamber. Wolfe's eyes gleamed with something between fury and fascination. Then we are close. He stood, a rare enough event to startle tectonic plates. He paced once behind the desk, then stopped thunderous. Archie, bring me Lydia's photostats, and the brass fragments. I brought them. Wolfe studied the pieces like a king examining an assassin's dagger. Murder, he said quietly, is rarely committed to conceal nothing. These chambers held the sins of powerful men. Someone fears those sins resurrected. And they're killing anyone who gets near. Indeed. He closed his eyes again, thinking. When he opened them, his decision was carved in granite. We press harder. I nodded. Just tell me where to start. Wolfe tugged the bell cord. After dinner. Dinner? I echoed. Yes, he said firmly. Fritz's lamb roast waits for no man, not even murderers. I couldn't help it, I laughed. In a case full of buried rooms and strangled archivists, at least one thing remained constant. You don't get between Nero Wolfe and dinner. I stepped out of the elevator at the Historical Reclamation Project offices with the kind of determination you reserve for chasing a cab in a thunderstorm. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming and reflecting neon like some kind of low-budget Vegas. My shoes clacked against the wet pavement, announcing my arrival, though I had the feeling Martha Kell already knew I was coming. She was the type who could hear the tick of a clock in a different borough. The same office smelled like dust, ambition, and the faint trace of despair that old files emit when they've been ignored too long. Martha's desk was the usual fortress, papers stacked like brick walls, typewriter ribbons curling with resentment, and one small drawer that appeared to be locked more for appearances than security. She looked up from her chair, brittle as a dried twig, her expression a mixture of wariness and calculation. When she saw me, her posture stiffened even further, like I'd just asked to borrow a cannon from the Revolutionary War. "Goodwin," she said, voice clipped, almost brittle. "I suppose this is about Lydia." I perched lightly on the edge of a chair that squeaked under my weight. "Miss Kell, I promise I won't bite, but I need to know what Lydia found. She left something behind for you, a fragment, if I understand correctly." She flicked a glance toward the locked drawer and then back at me. "She entrusted me with a page," she said carefully. "One fragment. That is all. Wouldn't you like to share it? You know, for posterity, or the faint hope that a man might be amused?" I smiled, but the humour fell flat in the damp, serious air of the office. Martha exhaled slowly and pulled a manila envelope from the drawer. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper. Names were listed in tight script. Vere, his grandfather, and 3 other figures I didn't recognize. Beneath the names, faint notations hinted at illicit activity, construction of underground chambers, unofficial structural modifications, and references to city planning approvals that seemed to have bypassed any legal oversight. My pulse quickened. This was the smoking gun Lydia had stumbled upon, the reason she had been frightened enough to come to Wolfe, and now the reason her life had been snatched from her. "So," I said softly, "this is what she was chasing. Not treasure, not gold, blackmail files for the city's elite." Martha nodded, a tremor betraying the steadiness of her voice. "She said it would destroy the department. She was right. I didn't threaten her life, Archie. I only asked her to reconsider, to be cautious." "Cowardice, not murder," I murmured, flipping through the sheet. "That's somewhat comforting." She bit her lip, eyes glistening. "You think I'm lying?" "No," I said, "just nervous. And anyone with this in their hands would be. You didn't kill her. You were afraid. That's a very human reaction." She let a small, almost imperceptible smile slip. "Thank you. I was beginning to think everyone thought the worst of me." I returned the paper to her carefully. "Well, some of us do know how to measure fear versus guilt." Her glance lingered on me longer than I expected. I shifted in my seat, realizing this was more than a professional encounter. It was emotional terrain. Lydia's death had left traces in all of us. Wolfe upstairs would approve of my diligence and maybe even my compassion, though he'd never say it aloud. When I left her office, the street outside seemed brighter, or maybe it was just the relief of carrying some truth in my pocket. I hailed a cab, and by the time I arrived back at the Brownstone, Wolfe was pacing in his office, hands clasped behind his back, scowl firmly in place. The orchids, freshly watered, cast a delicate scent that contrasted with the gravity of the information I brought. "Report," Wolfe said, without looking at me. I laid it out, the envelope, the page listing Vere and his grandfather, the other names, Martha's confession of fear, not malice. Wolfe's eyes flicked from the page to me with an expression that suggested both pride and exasperation. "Pertinacity," he said finally, in that backhanded way he has, "is your redeeming feature, Goodwin. You have managed to extract truth where others flounder in hesitation." "Thank you, sir," I said, amused. "I take it as praise." He didn't answer immediately, choosing instead to sip a small glass of beer that he held as if it were a goblet of the finest Bordeaux. I raised an eyebrow. Wolfe drinking beer at this hour? Blasphemy or celebration, I couldn't tell. "You know, sir, this is technically after lunch. You're violating your own rules." "Rules," Wolfe said sharply, "are subject to interpretation, and I interpret them to include morale sustenance during crises." I grinned. "Morale sustenance. Right. For a crisis, one needs a small fortress of hops." He scowled, but only slightly. I knew then he was indulging my jest. It's that subtle protectiveness he has, the way he tolerates my commentary when he might easily squash it. There's a certain warmth in it, buried beneath layers of formal precision. I laid the documents and photostats on the desk. "So, the pattern is becoming clear. Lydia died for discovering the first chamber, Phipps for the second, Rowan for talking, and now we know someone is systematically erasing the record of a political dynasty. Wolfe tapped the page. Precisely. The sins buried beneath West 35th are not for the public eye, and they are being erased systematically. At that moment, the phone rang. I picked it up. Kramer's voice came, clipped and tired. "Goodwin, we have complications." I listened, pencil poised. "Go on." "Public opinion's turning," Kramer said. "Someone leaked a story suggesting Wolfe himself is hiding evidence, anonymous. Papers are spinning it into a scandal." I blinked. "You mean the Gazette's already working overtime to tarnish a detective's reputation?" Kramer exhaled. "Exactly. And people are buying it." I hung up, turning to Wolfe. His jaw was tight, nostrils flaring slightly. "My integrity," he said, "is insulted, not by words, but by the insinuation that I would protect myself by withholding the truth." "Relax, sir," I said. "It's just public opinion. Gossip dressed in ink." He waved a hand. "Phooey. Gossip can kill, Archie, and they threaten to impede an investigation." I knew that tone. Protective, calculating, and just shy of explosive. He wasn't angry with me or Kramer. He was enraged at the audacity of suggesting his honor could be questioned. I placed a hand on the edge of the desk. "Then we'll handle it like we handle everything. Facts first, fools second." He studied me a long moment, then nodded, the smallest hint of approval softening the stormy scowl. "Good. And keep in mind, those who meddle with secrets are capable of anything. No step must be taken without foresight." I leaned back, allowing a wry smile. "Copy that. Step carefully, avoid dark alleys, and perhaps warn Martha Kell she's safe, for now." Wolfe's glare reminded me that flippancy has consequences. "Archie," he said, slow and deliberate, "your role is to gather facts, not entertain notions of mercy." "Yes, sir," I said. "I'll contain my charity to the minimum acceptable level." He exhaled and returned to his papers, studying the fragments as though they were the nucleus of a new world. I poured myself a coffee, letting the weight of the discoveries sink in. Every chamber, every fragment, every coerced silence. It was a map of fear, layered over political ambition. And in the back of my mind, I knew the pieces were nearly in place. One more push, one final revelation, and Wolfe would conduct the showdown that would uncover what truly lay beneath West 35th Street. The stage was set. The players were anxious, frightened, or complicit. And I, for better or worse, had the keys to every confession, every hint, every whispered secret that would bring this case to its inevitable conclusion. I glanced at Wolfe. He was drinking his beer, calm now, though his eyes still burned with precision. I had a moment to admire the man's patience, and his skill at planning a war while maintaining the appearance of a gentleman sipping a beverage far too early. I sipped my coffee, preparing my notes, and muttered under my breath, "One more night of strategy, a little bit of luck, and we finally find out who's hiding behind the walls and why."